Well, with the amount of experience you have in conflict resolution, can you share 3 or 4 reasons, maybe the top 3 or 4 reasons people end up in conflicts that are polarized enough to damage relationships? I mean, I know that's a big question because of the diversity of people's issues, but archetypally, I would imagine there is 3 or 4 kind of common triggers or things that start the fire.
It's true. There really are. You know, I say in process work that the number one cause of most of the world conflicts is the unconscious use of rank and power.
Yes.
Right. And so in process work, I talk about different kinds of rank, social rank, like your age, your race, your gender, your economic level, your education level, your health level, all of those your sexual orientation, all of those things give you a certain amount of rank and power depending on the society you're in. Then there's structural rank, like what are your formal positions in any organization? Then there's psychological rank, like did you come from a healthy family background, or did you have access to good therapists and teachers, or Paul Chek, or whatever, who could help you develop where you didn't have your strengths? Do you have psychological power? Can you stay centered? And finally, spiritual rank. Like, can you feel connected to something deeper, something bigger than yourself, something universal that can be there for you and energize you? And so one of the things we say in process work is the more rank you have, the less aware you need to be. Right? Like if I have a lot of power and a lot of safety, I don't have to be very careful walking down the street. I can walk fairly unaware. If I'm at great risk, I have to walk with incredible awareness. And so how do we become aware of our rank and how we carry it? And how can we carry it consciously? And how can we carry it for the benefit of others? And how can we carry it with sensitivity? So it's that unconsciousness of rank. And it comes up as all kinds of social issues in relationship, all kinds of inequalities, right? Like, for example, that I'm a man in a heterosexual relationship brings up all kinds of rank and power issues that I have to even guess into because my partner may just have adjusted to living at that level. I'll give you an example. One time, many, many years ago, I was teaching in Canada with a friend, and I had a dream that Sage was going to leave me because of my economic rank in our relationship, because I was doing more at that time. I was out earlier, I'm older, and I was more successful. So I called her and I said, I had a dream that you're going to leave me because of the way I use my economic power in this relationship. She said, that is the craziest thing I ever heard of. Why don't you go back and teach your seminar and not bother me? So an hour later, she called me back and she said, how did you know?
That's so funny. She had to think about it.
She said, that's right. That's rank and power. You see, you just start to adjust to the inequalities. You think that's the way life is. But she said, it's so weird. I've been thinking for months at the back of my mind, I'm not happy in our relationship about something. And I've been even thinking these crazy thoughts about leaving you. And as soon as you said that, you nailed it. And I said, well, our economic structure has been based on sort of this radical woman therapist in Eugene who said we should try this kind of economic structure. And I said, but I asked my friend I'm teaching with who was a lesbian woman, and she said, I would never do that structure. I hate that structure. So Sage said, let's throw that out and let's make a new structure. So we did. So Paul, I ran into that therapist at the health food store and I told her what happened. And she said, oh, I got rid of that structure years ago. That almost went to my marriage.
She grew, but she forgot to tell you.
She forgot to send an email to the rest of us.
Yes, exactly.
But
I can tell you.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can tell you how I handle that. I make the most money by far amongst my 2 wives, but I honestly haven't got a clue how much money I have. I turn it all over to Penny, and I say, my only rule is if I can't buy the books I want, the smoke I want, then we have to have a talk about the money.
See, I should have, when I ran into you years ago, I should have asked you rather than that woman. That's a great system.
It works really well. There's no question about I don't even know how much money I have. I have to ask them, how much money did I make this year or this month?
It's so wonderful.
I don't work for money. I work to really express my love and to help as many people as I can.
Yes.
But I know money is a linchpin in so many of the relationships I've worked with. It's probably the most common one, actually.
It's a big thing. And you see, it's that unconsciousness. I thought I was doing great. And Sage was like, well, I'm a woman and he's a man, whatever, and I should just live with this. And I'm not even going to notice that it bothers me. So that's what's so difficult about rank. And one way to use your higher rank is to guess into the person who has lower rank. And don't make them do all the work. You hear that a lot, for example, in anti-racism work, where the African-American community will say, don't make us do all the work around pointing out the agony of racism. If you're in the mainstream, use your awareness, use your rank to study and learn and inquire. So it's how we use our rank is of huge importance, and to go for more and more happiness and equality. So that is one of the biggest things. And the second thing is that our minds, you know, that are just pretty dualistic. I mean, society supports us in splitting at really young ages. And so those splits we talked about then go into the relationship. In process work, you say you can't have an outer conflict unless you have the same conflict inside you.
Mm-hmm.
So my split goes into my relationship. And then I fight with my partner as my split. And that's why we do things like X and U work. The third thing I would say is that we're like, most of us are walking trauma embodiments. Not only our personal trauma, but historical trauma. One of the things I've been studying the last 10 years, especially in myself, when I felt like I cleared most of my family trauma, I remember Mendel once said to me, now you've got a number of years still to do on your historical trauma. So we have all these things that trigger us, and we need to learn how to work with our trauma and clear it, and how to work with triggers in relationship. We were talking about Aikido, Paul, and so one of the things you do in Aikido is you stand in a position called my eye. My eye means the distance at which my opponent, where I can stay connected with my opponent, but they can't easily kick or punch me.
Mm-hmm.
But in an intimate relationship, martially, we're this close. And so all our central points are vulnerable. And so, you know, relationship pushes every button we've got. And so a lot of what we're teaching in process work is how to navigate triggering in relationships. And a lot of my work is helping people, and I'm sure your work too, is helping people clear their personal and historical traumas. So,
yes.
Right. I often say that most of the conflicts we're having between our partner, most of the intensity has nothing to do with the moment.
I think that's one of the reasons why having a committed practice where you spend time in what would classically be called meditation, but I find it in Tai Chi, Qigong, any repetitive movement where your ego is pacified by the movement just enough that you can experience the unconscious.
Yep.
I've also found through the use of plant medicines, if they're used intelligently, they really do a great job of, you know, bringing the dragons out of the dungeon. And
yep.
But my point is that if we just take some time each day to really just be quiet and stand back and do an alchemy, what they call sublimating, rise above, and just watch what's bubbling in the well of self.
That's
and
it.
You see all this crazy shit coming up, and most of it is, like you say, generational. It's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and stuff that you have to start looking into. You're like, where in the world does that come from?
That's right.
But I think most people have made themselves so busy and so distracted that they end up just falling into these repeated trauma dramas, and, you know, they lose jobs, they lose relationships, they lose confidence in themselves. And it's really, I would say it's reached a dangerous pinnacle in the world right now. I don't think we can keep playing this distraction game much longer, which is paradoxical because you got Zuckerberg and all these others that are doing just such an amazing job of pulling people right into additional virtual realities and getting them further and further from a relationship with themselves, with their dog, their cat, their mother, their brother, their spouse. And I think that's just a death stroke.
It is. It is. You hit it on the nose. You've got to have that interest in that. Like, my partner looked at me this way and I almost went through the roof, or they said this little whatever, or they touched me a little bit too quickly or whatever. And I went through, what is getting triggered in me? And we have a word I really like in process work. We call that your psychological inheritance. In other words, it's not just what's happened to you in your life, but you don't just inherit from your parents, hopefully a little money or an apartment or whatever. You pick a painting, you inherit the stuff that they didn't work on. And especially the historical trauma. And so that gets triggered all the time. So what we're teaching is how to recognize those triggers. The early stuff I studied, Paul, was just like, well, let yourself get triggered and just give it to your partner. But that just burns up relationships, right?
Yeah, Jung said all children are tasked with the unfinished business of their parents' lives. And I think that's just terribly true.
Yeah, terribly true. And how to do that work. And then you've done that. And then, but your parents, one of the things about big historical trauma is that people don't talk about it, right? Like when I've studied, I came from a family that had a lot of Holocaust history and whatever. I never even knew until a couple of years ago. I was talking to my aunt in her 90s and she said, "Oh, where were you working?" I said, "I just got back from Warsaw." She said, "Oh, do you know we're from Poland?" I was like in my 60s. I didn't know we're from Poland.
Wow.
One of the things that families do when they've had historical trauma on both sides, I've worked with Jewish families, I've worked with German families, I've worked with Japanese families. Nobody talks much about the war around World War II or around the trauma. It's all covered up, not mentioned, so it hangs around like ghosts.
Yeah.
In our lives. So how do we work with that?
Yeah, it's good that you're going to have all this stuff in your training program to help people kind of know where to look in the closet, because a lot of people just don't even know where to look,
That's right. You don't even know, and you don't even know it's with you. One of the stories I have is, I was training body workers, and sometimes I'll see a body worker and they're working on somebody like this, like, oh my God, and sometimes I'll say to them, "You got to work with me because I'm afraid you're going to hurt somebody." And the number of times that what's come out is their own, for example, their father's unprocessed trauma in their country running through their body. And then we'll work on that historical trauma, and then I'll go back and watch them do body work. It changes their whole physiology. It changes. Those are really powerful things. So like you say, we need trainings that teach people how to access that stuff, right? And how to clear it.